And that's sort of where I was about a year ago when this all came together. So my journey's been 17 years of being sick just to try and figure out the pieces of the puzzle, which we finally sort of have a good game plan now as to what's going on. But it took a very long time to get where I'm at today.
What's it like to, you're doing great. What is it like to, like cancer, diabetes, heart problems, all that kind of stuff? That's like, people can instantly empathize with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh, you've got this disease that everybody knows about.
Right. But
how did it feel? How did it feel knowing that you had something that no one could figure out? How did you have something? I mean, there were physical signs. I've seen the videos
mm-hmm.
of you spasming. What was it like to be able to have to deal with that? To have to know that you had something that no one could figure out,
mm-hmm.
and it wasn't the kind of disease where people would just be like,
right.
"Oh, you know, tell me about that."
I think that I say, you know, anytime I talk about my health battle, because it's been a battle for sure, but anytime I talk about that, the most challenging thing when you don't have a label, and I used to actually sit and pray. I would, you know, I'm spiritual, and I used to say, please give me a diagnosis. I didn't even care if you told me I had 3 months to live. I didn't care if you threw the worst things at me. I wanted to have something that I could say to people, listen, this is what it is. This is, you know, you want to be labeled. To walk around without knowing, and then you start to go a little bit crazy. You're fighting this battle in your own head saying, geez, is this all in my own head? Am I losing it? I mean, I had people tell me you're crazy, because there's not a concrete answer. Like you said, someone says to you, I have cancer, I have Parkinson's, I have, you know, that label so widely known, so it was so much easier to identify. And there's doctors who specialize in all these things. When you go into a hospital or you're dealing with a doctor and they're saying, well, what do you have? We can clearly see that nobody's muscles can fire for 26 hours. You can't physically make your body do that. It's impossible. What is this? Especially when you're going to new doctors, new hospitals, and you're saying, look, something's clearly not right. But they're looking at it, they're looking at the history and going, I don't even know what this is. And some of the scariest parts was the doctors who would say, you may have something we've never even heard of before. And that was probably the hardest thing for me, was just that battle, getting a good team of doctors, you're trying to orchestrate sort of a team and finding a good, you know, in a sense, a good primary care who's the coach kind of leading it and directing you in certain ways. And that has been, out of the 17 years, that I will tell you, that has been the hardest part. And I empathize with anybody in that, because when you don't know, that battles is almost harder than the actual illness itself, because you're trying to tell people. I would go to work and they'd say, well, what is it that you have? And I would look at them and be like, it's such a complicated answer for me, because it started as Lyme disease, but then they don't really know if it's Lyme anymore. They don't know what it is. All I know, it's this. Now they're saying dystonia. Now they're saying this. Now, and there was still some doctors who said, I still think you might have MS, or this still could be early Parkinson's. Those diagnoses were still coming out about a year and a half ago. I still had doctors telling me that. So it's really been fairly recent that we kind of pieced everything together with this dystonia and all that. And lo and behold, the most interesting thing is I still have doctors who still aren't even on that board with me. They look and they say, that's not what it is. They don't even still believe it, but I stick with I stick with the team that I have, and I know, and they have a good feel on this, but I think because it's so out of the ordinary. And that's the thing I used to pray to myself too. I'm like, I wish I just had something. You don't wish you're sick, but if you're going to be sick, I just wish I had something that everybody knew. I mean, to think about it now, that's what I was asking for, is actually kind of ironic, because I'm thinking, you're sitting in your bed going, I just wish they'd come in and tell me what this is. And I don't care what it is at this point. Just tell me so now I know what I'm fighting. I used to always say, I'll fight anything. I've been a fighter my whole life. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and I'll fight anything. I'll step into the ring against anything. But if you don't know your opponent, you don't know what you're up against, how do you know what you're fighting? You're going in blind. And that to me that's the hardest challenge with being sick, I think. And I think was the hardest thing for me to actually come to terms with too. And even people in my own family, because they'd be saying, well, it's hard for them to kind of gear, well, what is going on? Are you just getting medication for no reason? Is she really sick? You have to convince people almost in a lot of ways that you're actually sick. That part, I don't like that. I don't like to have to convince anybody of how I'm feeling.
That was a correct answer. That was fantastic.
That was all right. Sorry, I had to get a drink
that
there.
was wonderful. We're going to get to Dr. Soupy here soon, and you're giving me exactly what I'm looking for. Basically, the thread of your story is that nobody knew, and you had to come to Little Health Central.
Little Health Central over here.
Yeah. And tell me what it's like. I mean, you're at the prime of your life. You're an athlete. There's a possibility that you might be going to the Olympics. You look normal. Tell me what it was like. Remember when we had that conversation at Jason's Deli, where you said you felt like you were trapped in your own body?
Yeah, I really actually felt like a prisoner. I mean, I would feel like a prisoner in my own body. I'd get up and I'd think, mentally, I was still the athlete who was supposed to go play on the Olympic team. I was still that kid playing basketball or field hockey. And physically, no matter how I would try and say it in my own head, I can do this, my body was just they were not on the same page at all. We weren't even in the same book. I mean, my mind was thinking one thing and my body was doing something else. And to be trapped like that for 17 years was literally a living hell. It was awful because you'd have days when you'd be thinking, and that was another hard thing too, is people would say, but you don't look sick. That probably is another frustrating thing for me too, because what does sick look like? I mean, we have this idea of what sick looks like. Everybody does. Oh, they look sick. They don't look good. And, when you come in and it's easy, I can put on smoke and mirrors all day long and I can look the part. But internally, inside, and if you saw an episode happen, because it could happen at any moment, if I was just out working too much and I overheated or got overtired, boom, I could go from looking like this to being incapacitated, like flopping around on the back floor of the kitchen. So that frustrating element of it is it was being a prisoner every single day and trying to come to terms with that. I struggled with so much of that too, because I'm not the type who's going to sit back and not fight. So to be stuck in my own body, it would be this constant battle between mind over matter, but your body, I just couldn't do it. I mean, there were days my body just would go, I'm done. And my mind, to have to accept that was a huge internal struggle for me. That was a big challenge. I still struggle with that one a lot. I do. That's hard for me.
What can you describe for me? When I had my back problems, there was a combination of football and the combination of carrying heavy things. There were days where, and you've already kind of answered this, there were days where I was fine. Mm-hmm. There were days where I could just go and do my thing. And even my sister, who I love, who's one of my closest friends in the whole wide world, was questioning. Because there'd be days where I was fine, and you went to work today. Why can't you go to work the next day? And
right.
Can you describe to me what that loneliness felt like?
Absolutely. It's a very lonely feeling to feel like that, because, and I'm not one to be out looking for sympathy either. And I work, I work on my feet. I'm a bartender at the golf course, and that was a hard thing. I'd slap a smile on. I would go to work, and internally I would be struggling to just get through the day. And I'd be thinking, all right, I got to work 10 hours and then I'll have 2 days off, and let's see what I can do. And I'd struggle. I'd get through it. But inside was this constant battle of me being like, I don't know if I can actually physically do this. And I'd put on this huge facade. I'd put a smile on, and I'd go out and I'd ask everybody else how they were doing and what can I do for you and how's this going with this one and that, and putting on, almost being on a stage. And then I would come home and I would crash. That was it. I was done. I'd come home here and it was like submitting at the end of the day. And I didn't like anybody to see that side of it. And I would go to I was in an apartment at the time, and I'd get in my bedroom sometimes 2-3 days at a time, couldn't even get out of bed. And I'd be stuck there. And it was lonely because I didn't have, my family's not down here. My support network was great, but there was very few people who I invited